Recording in progress. Excellent. Welcome back. My name is Hajime Ishikawa. This is episode 3 of I Don't Know What I'm Doing, but we'll figure it out as we go. So this is my brother. Should I call you Link?
Yeah, that's fine. That's
Yeah,
perfect.
Link. So Link is my younger brother, and he has many words of wisdom. And
Man, I feel like you're hyping me up right now.
yeah, man, it's what I do out here. But I started this, I said earlier, like identity, purpose, figuring myself out. And then and speaking of Gary Vee, on my way out from our parents' place, I watched some videos of Gary and I came upon you gotta know yourself in order to take on many other challenges. And I thought that was like a really good starting point for me. And so I wanted, I guess, your help on who am I? And I was also talking earlier about my identity has always been like external factors, right? I was talking about like how I'm a son, I'm a brother, I've been a boyfriend in the past before, a swimmer, a lifeguard, an EMT, a nurse, and a nurse practitioner. Like all these things are like external. But in terms of like internal, like who am I? What's my purpose?
Mm.
That's what I'm trying to, I guess, tackle more.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting because I personally haven't thought about that in a very long time.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what happens when you're participating in our society, right? And if you're busy, the busier you are, the less time you have to think about that because those aren't really relevant to your day-to-day task, right?
Right.
It kind of becomes something that runs in the background. Like it's like your operating system for your computer. Like no one knows what their operating system is really and what it does. All you care about is the fact that you log on, you type in your password, and you probably use Google Chrome for most of your 80% of what you do, like Zoom. You don't really think about what's underlying all that to make that happen. So I think it's definitely, super important, like you said, and probably a really good starting point.
And so Gary was talking about how, I wonder if I have to pay him for mentioning him so many times. But
no, I don't think that's how it works.
But he knows his strength. He knows who he is. He knows his strengths and weaknesses, and he doubles down on his strengths. But and I guess I'm tackling this challenge because I was talking to you earlier about how I'm trying to be more I think initially started with trying to be more masculine. That was kind of my goal, be more of a man. But then it kind of went down the road of being an alpha, and then how we spoke about the other day, I'm more of an asshole, and because parts of me does feel like I'm faking it. And is it because I'm evolving and it feels weird, or is it because it's just not right for me? And I think I don't know where I'm at in that sense. But from your perspective, what are my strengths, weaknesses, and who am I? Because I've always kind of been just kind of whatever. And as you know, I'm fairly quiet if I don't have anything to say. I think I'm fairly quiet in general, unless it's about me. And so I kind of wanted your take because you're my brother, and I think I want you to be brutally honest.
Well, I mean, there were a lot of questions there, so just let me know if I'm missing something.
Sure.
But I'm gonna start with the strengths because that's what I remember immediately.
Yeah.
I think knowing you for pretty much your entire life is that your strength is and I think it comes naturally with being the first child of any family, is that you know how to kind of explore a certain field, right, that you want to know about or you have to know about. I think a lot of people can get away with just having things handed to them, or if they can stay reserved and they just kind of get by. But typically it's that first child, especially of an immigrant family, you're forced to learn a brand new way of life, right? Because it's something that your parents may not necessarily be able to teach you. Um, and you're going to be the first one going through it. So that I don't want people to get confused with being, I guess, like self-starting. I think there's a difference between being a self-starter and having, what I'm talking about is having the courage and the acceptance that one must kind of go into this unknown space and just figure it out, right? And also, I think what comes with that partially is that, especially because I think I'm more of a perfectionist, I think one thing I had to learn when I was like out in the real world is that you have to be okay with what you have, right? I think part of what comes with having to explore something for yourself is you only know what you know, and you're able to be okay with not knowing everything because it's impossible, right? You can't do everything on your own. So you learn to just kind of learn what you get or do what you can and then move on. Whereas I think someone like me, who probably had way more things handed to me than you have, I'm able to kind of have that luxury to think, essentially, right? Like the luxury to think, okay, how can this be better than that? Or how do I make sure that this is all of it, right? I'm too scared to go in without having the full picture because I'm not used to it. Whereas I think someone like you has the courage to go ahead and do that and not be bothered by things like that. And I'm noticing this in every older sibling. The more, oh, sorry, the eldest sibling, right? The more I get to know more and more people, the more I get to know myself, and the older I get, it's become very apparent that I have these concerns that people are just like, why are those concerns? And it's because most of those people that I talk to, and naturally, most of my best friends from like childhood even are elder siblings. I'm like one of the few younger siblings that I actually know, which is kind of interesting. I don't know how that ended up
Oh yeah,
happening.
that's true. Even with your two boys, right? Like they're old, they're the oldest.
Yeah, I mean, all,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
of all of them were the oldest, and even my friends at college are all the oldest, like the older siblings. So it was just like, maybe I have like one or two like single, like only child friends, which have, it's a different kind of dynamic. But yeah, most of the friends that I can call like my closest friends are the older siblings or the oldest siblings.
Mhm.
And I think to a certain extent, there's like this bit of like this tolerance for them. I think I'm like used to them, and it's not in a negative way. It's actually funny
Mhm.
because the younger siblings that I do know are kind of annoying to me.
Oh,
I
that's
don't
weird because like you would think you would like mesh with them more because you're like the second child or the younger child.
Yeah, so I know that we're kind of digressing here, but I did notice that that tends to be the case where it's like maybe even as a younger sibling myself, maybe as I grew and developed, I became more like an older sibling, because I like went off to live on my own and like had my own
Mhm.
life away from family and things like that. So I think I adopted some of those mentalities and those attitudes over time, and maybe that's why I find it kind of annoying. But I definitely find it easier to hang with those people who are like you, who have that courage to just go ahead and start do things, right? But I do notice that I lack in those spaces as compared to them because they have like a head start, right? You and them have like that head start. So, kind of looping back to the start, as a strength, that's definitely, I would say, is like it, like for sure strength. You're able to just do things, right? You're able to just get started, and you're not gonna shy away from it just because it's unfamiliar to you. It's
Oh,
I would say the word is maybe like commitment, right? Like you're not
okay.
afraid to commit, like go into it, because you've never had that luxury, I guess. That's my assumption.
Mhm. Interesting. And it's funny you said that because like I feel like I got almost more baby than you and more things handed to me. I think I saw it more when you went off to college and you figured shit out on your own while I stayed local. Even though I did go out, right? Like I didn't really think about because you got a job right away after college. Like I graduated and then 5 years later I got like a real job. In the meantime, I was like we're living at home and like coaching and making
Mhm.
like very little money. And so I think that's where I saw my like a difference in you and me was like, oh, like I and for me, I'm thinking like, oh, you're a go-getter. Like you like get shit done and like you're independent and think for yourself.
Yeah, and I think you have a point there. I think in some ways I am more like that. But I think the connecting or like the common theme is that when people are thrown into those situations where you must do something, whether it be out of like sole necessity or because you want it, you grow into that go-getter.
Mhm.
So, I think you definitely have that in you. And if you are starting to feel like that part is lacking in any sort, it just means that you don't have that imperative, whether it be external or internal, right?
Mhm.
And but yeah, no, but regardless, I think like the fact that you just decided to start up this, right, this series, right? Like
Yeah.
some people can't get themselves to do that. They don't have the courage to do that.
Mhm.
So
All right. So strength one is just going and taking action, just doing it.
yeah, taking action, sparking inspiration into action.
Mhm.
And I think that's hard for a lot of people, right?
I
Like
see.
speaking of Gary Vee, because you brought him up,
Yeah.
half the people who go to Gary Vee for advice is about how do I get started, right? How do I whatever?
Mhm.
How do I make viral posts? How do I become an influencer? How do I whatever? That
Mhm.
has to do with like social media. And his response is always just do it, right? Just get started. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter how good it is. Doesn't matter how if you like it, just start talking about it and then just do it, right? And
Mhm.
not to like kind of try to make certain things happen just to get started for the sake of getting started. And then almost like this popularity and growth comes from it's a result, not a plan, right? You don't
Mhm.
plan to make viral stuff. You just make something and it ends up becoming viral.
Right.
So yeah, I think
All
that
right.
carries in you. Yeah, for sure.
Um, awesome.
So
So what's
another
like,
another strength, right?
I mean, whatever flows to your mind. There's no, we don't have a script. I literally just texted you and we're like, yeah, let's do this.
Yeah, word.
So
So,
you
I
can
mean,
talk about whatever.
I think your physical capabilities is definitely comes from genetics, right? Like I think you and I
Hmm.
both carry those athletic genes, which I'm very lucky to have them. I feel like I can be a piece of shit and still be in the upper quartile, so like it's really great. But
Yeah.
yeah, like physically you're very fit and very in tune with your body, and like your that in addition to your interest in it, right? The human
Hmm.
body has helped you excel to understand it, not just
Hmm.
manipulate it in the way
That's
you want to.
true.
You understand the human body, so you understand how to strengthen. You understand when something's feeling weaker, or when you feel like a certain tool that modern technology gives us becomes a crutch, right? So,
Hmm.
for those of you who don't know, right, he wears shoes that are very weak in support because the philosophy is that if you are relying on the support in your shoes, your feet will never get strengthened, right?
Right.
So those are things that I think most people can't really critically think about. They think about what it looks like or how it feels, and that's really it. So
Hmm.
that's another strength, this in tuneness with, that's not a word, but how in
Right.
tune you are with your body and as well as your physical capabilities using your body as well.
I see. And I guess in tuneness sparked this. I just like the last clip I saw of Eric Gary Vee was like 3 minutes on like self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess that's like the hot topic is self-awareness, strength and weakness.
Mm.
And then
I
that's why
think
I like the awareness of like the whole what my body feels like. Because some people can't really like translate what they feel into like how do I fix it, you know?
you mean physically?
Yeah. In terms of like physical ailments. And like they
Yeah,
don't feel the unevenness of one foot versus the other or something like that.
right, right, or like the muscle imbalances and
Hmm.
things like
Right.
that. Yeah. So I think the thing that you're trying to get to is, and you'll learn this in sociology and
Hmm.
psychology once you get around to it, but
Yeah.
it's about identity, right?
Right.
Everyone has what is academically referred to and colloquially referred to as an identity. And that changes, right? You don't actually just have one identity. There
Hmm.
are all these different angles of which you can approach identity. One of them being, for example, your social identity will be different from another identity, which I don't remember the specific like terminology for. But if
Okay.
you open any textbook, you'll notice that there are all these different identities, and that actually influences how you behave, how you think, everything, right? And people have roles that pertain to their identity. So a mother, like, or let's just say a person, right? You mentioned this at the start. A person is a child, and if they're old enough and went through the process, then they're also a parent. So they have a role as a child and a role as a parent, and those are both identities as well. Now, in the social sense, if you have a certain job, you have that identity too. Your
Right.
responsibilities and your behaviors, what you think, it will all be influenced by that. And then there's also just, things that you can't control, like race and appearance and, things like that. Um, and sometimes you can have something called like role strain or role conflict, where those things are not compatible with each other, or one inevitably like kind of decreases your ability to carry out your responsibilities in another. So I think this whole concept of like self-awareness and identity is it's very important. And I think not enough people have an understanding and that self-awareness, right? Because most people don't even know what it is. So
Yeah.
I think this exercise is something that, like, hopefully the viewers and the listeners are going to take this to heart and start to think like, okay, maybe I should do this too. you
Mhm.
know Even if I feel like I'm not in a bad place in life, or even if I feel like I have everything that I wanted, it's still always good, because you can't you can't get to a destination if you don't know where you are.
Right.
And,
Like your
and
starting point.
right, your starting point. So I think that's, yeah, anyways, that's a side
And
thing.
that and like going back, like because Gary was like differentiating between who you are
Mhm.
versus who you aspire or view yourself to be can be very different, right?
Yes.
And I think that's where I am trying to reevaluate, like, what am I? Who am I? What's my purpose?
Yeah.
So
Well, see, this whole purpose thing is like, the great thing about purpose is that, in my view, you get to choose your own purpose,
yeah.
right? Your whole life is like this your whole life is a choose your own adventure game, movie, whatever you want to call it. Like, you control whatever you want, right?
Mhm,
I think a lot of people are victim to like social pressure, and
mhm,
then they decide, oh, I can't because, right?
right.
But there's a very important distinction that I think too many people are not aware of. It's not I can't, right? It's I won't,
Mm,
right? People forget that they have a choice in everything,
right.
right? And I think not enough people have that acknowledgement, right? You have a choice to do whatever you want at any point for any reason. People might give you criticism. People, if it's against the law of the land that you live in, you might get punished for it. But those are all choices as well.
Mhm,
So you can abandon your family, right? That's a choice you can make.
mhm,
You can just go jump off a cliff. That's a choice you can make, right? But I think a lot of people say, well, first of all, a lot of people get stigma, right, for making these hard choices, or not even hard, just choices, because society has defined them to be certain things, right? Oh, if you kill yourself, then you were weak, or you're a
mhm,
trouble, you're a bad person. Oh, if you're not a good child to your parents, you're a bad person. Well, I mean, let's get a little bit more like metaphysical here. Not even metaphysical. Let's get physical and scientific here, right? Good and bad are social constructs that we fucking decided are true, and
mhm,
we subscribe to them, right?
right.
They're not fundamentally real thing. You can't pick up an object and be like, this is a good object. It's like, no. If someone can disagree with you, right, subjectively, it's not real. So
Right.
back to purpose, right? You can make your purpose whatever you want for any reason
Mhm,
that you want. I mean, likely you want something that's going to get you to feel good, right? And
mhm,
generally, when people like you, or people approve of you, or you can feel proud of yourself,
right.
which has a lot to do with your environment, right? You feel good. So I'm not saying to discount all these like social pressures and stuff, like social rules and etiquettes, like they're there for a reason. They all, I think it's just important to be able to navigate that in such a non-restrictive way, whereas a lot of people are conditioned by, what I would consider not as good, more knowledgeable others, who have essentially taught you in some way, shape, or form that you can or cannot, which is not necessarily true.
Okay. So I think I actually want to eliminate purpose thing out of this exercise because I'm trying to, I think I just want to be more honest
Honest, okay.
with myself and like who I am.
So, I think, we never finished this. We were talking about strengths and
Yeah,
weaknesses,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's like a starting point, I think.
Hmm.
Um, and you kind of brought this up, but like what other people view as your strengths and weaknesses actually don't really matter,
Because
right?
does this go along the way of like what's good and what's bad? Like,
No, not even. It's just like
oh,
why does it matter that I think, for example, you're not good with money? I mean, that's not even true, right? That's not even
mhm,
true because I don't know how good you are with money necessarily. But that doesn't matter at the end of the day because that's my opinion. For
mhm,
every person that I think, right? Sorry, for every person that thinks that you're not good at something, there's gonna be a person who thinks you are good at something, at that same thing,
mhm,
right? Because strengths and weaknesses are relative.
mhm.
If you ask someone who's better than you, they might think it's a weakness. If you ask someone who's worse than you, they'll think it's a strength, right?
Right,
So
right.
so that's why I say like it's not very good. I think there are
Mhm,
some educators who have the ability to see when someone has a aptitude and potential for it,
mhm,
but even that is comparative, right?
mhm,
It's you need some sort of reference to say that is a weak or strong thing. Because if you
mhm,
never had a reference, it just is.
mhm.
So I think what's more important if you want self-awareness, especially as it relates to like being honest with yourself, right? Notice how you didn't say honest to, for others, right? To honest to
Right.
yourself, honest with yourself. You just need to know what you think is your strength, what you think is your weakness, and what you view for yourself,
I see.
whatever that might be, whether it be a strength or weakness or anything else, your identity, whatever. And you have to kind of live your life inside out that way, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's what you're trying to do because you start off by mentioning that like it's everything's kind of defined externally, right?
Mhm,
You want to live from the inside, which basically means that you get to be your own artist, right? You kind of get to create this your own vision of your avatar or your character, right? Some people might see themselves as like a tidal wave. That's obviously it's not a person, but that's their identity for themselves. That's how they view themselves, right? Or some people might view themselves through like spirit animals, right? Oh, I'm a buffalo or like I'm
mhm.
a dragon or whatever. Obviously those things aren't real, but it doesn't, I think those are the things that drive your sense of being, your sense of self. And you have to obviously always compare that in relation to your environment so that you're not a crazy person. Although, the word crazy person is not really kosher. And I said that kind of on purpose. But yeah, it's like you need to know yourself at the way that you define it, not how others define it, and then kind of like constantly monitor that so that how you view yourself is kind of consistent with or in harmony with your environment, I think.
Yeah, I see.
I know I talked a lot there, but
I no, it's because like, well, I mean, there's gonna be pauses of silence because I'm even in like first, is this the third episode I said? I don't remember, but like the first two, I was like lots of pauses because I'm thinking to myself, right? So there'll be some pauses, but yeah, like this exercise is hard because I see myself as someone that's kind of like gone with the flow and molded around. And I said this earlier, but med school, I think, has been like almost the only thing that I am saying I want to do this.
okay,
Besides swimming, I think,
okay,
collegiate swimming. Um, but besides that, like looking internally and like I think maybe I don't know if everyone has a hard time of like self-awareness and who they are. But for me, like this is such a hard exercise because I guess I kind of have been a externally motivated individual with my identity. And like I know, okay, so the one thing I know my weakness is like academics, for example. Um, but I could also be kind of branched off into, is it academics because I'm not seeing what this leads to, or you know what I mean, like a motivating factor as to why I need to know something. And that's why I like consider myself a stronger clinical person versus an academic person in the healthcare realm, even though you have to know the academics to be good at clinicals. So like, so that whole, I like struggle with that whole balance, but like that's for sure like something I'm fairly weak at, I think. And a strength of mine, I think, like I guess physical, I said this earlier also in a different podcast, but like physical fitness and like have like pushing myself mentally through a physical adversity, I think, like athletics or working out is much easier than sitting in front of a book and trying to figure out what I'm like, process what I'm reading. But man, this self-awareness exercise is tougher than I thought.
What do you think is like tough about it?
Because there's no real answer, I think. Like I have to be able to confidently say this, like this is who I am. Or is it more like this is what I want to be? But then that's like what I am truly versus what I aspire to. So like that's where I think I wanted the input of others, be like, what do they see in me as strengths and weaknesses? Because I really don't really know.
So here's a question. What is the need to have this definitive answer as to, I guess, like who I am, right, for you?
I guess that'll give me purpose, or I'm hoping it gives me purpose.
So for example, like what is an example of a answer to who I am that will then give you some sort of purpose?
I like, for example, like I like girls and I want to date girls, but I don't think I'm necessarily good. Let's just say I'm not very good at talking to girls. Then I think I need to invest more in the pickup game, or upgrading my wardrobe, like learning how to like flirt. And then that's where like the whole being more masculine, assholey thing comes into play, but parts of it doesn't feel like it's who I am.
Okay.
And then that's where I was like, what am I like? Then I hit kind of moment of like, what am I doing? And so that's why I'm like, who am I? What am I?
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that to me,
it's almost like imposter syndrome. Like I was trying to be something I'm not, in a sense, to get the result that I want.
Sure. I mean, I don't think those are things that you necessarily have to go through these like exercises to like do. I think you just need to start listening to yourself, which I think you do. Like, for example, when you said, like, what am I doing, right? Like those are the times that tell you who you are. Right? If you ever have to think to yourself, what am I doing? That means there's something wrong or something off. So the thing that makes you feel like you're not doing what you are either like meant to be doing or want to be doing, or don't know why you're doing something, those are the moments where you say, okay, well, I'm not gonna do that. Right? It's almost like your I think your gut and emotions work in the same way that your body does, right? If you touch fire and your peripherals are just like, just trying to make your hand go away from that source of pain immediately. Like pain is something telling you something's wrong. It means don't do that thing that caused you pain. I think the emotions work the same way. If you feel like, oh, like, why did I do that for? They're just saying like, that's something that I shouldn't be doing.
Right.
So I think just through like interacting with your environment in many, many different ways, you start to get an understanding of like, oh, like I liked that. So, and that made me feel good. So I'm going to keep doing that. Or that didn't feel good. So I won't do that, you know? And I think it's that trial and error that gives you that real sense of self-awareness, not so much about, you know, trying to have an like a cognitive understand, like an academic understanding of who you are. It's definitely a good exercise to go through, but that, in my view, is not going to give you the full picture. Like that's not going to be enough. It's almost like trying to go into your first clinical just by studying textbooks. Like
Right.
you need to have some clinical experience to be able to navigate that space. And I think it's the same way for this.
Makes sense. And it also like kind of reminds me of like, just be selfish, right? Like do what you like and do what feels good and don't do what doesn't feel good.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how. I think those kind of these like simple rules, right, are dangerous because they can be misinterpreted and misapplied, right? So like just be selfish is a very, very simple rule, right? Because you still need to be in harmony with your environment.
Right.
So for example, if you're just being selfish, you might just one day, or someone listening to this might be like, oh, I'm just not going to go to work because I want to be selfish and it's important to be selfish. Like that's not really how it works. Like, I mean, sure, like I said earlier, you can do that. Is that going to be the best decision for you? Maybe, maybe not. Like you won't know. So like there's really the I think really the only rule, right, is that there are no rules. Right. The only rules that there are no rules, and yes, society has decided some rules that we all have again subscribed to, agreed that we will follow, but there's really no fundamental rule. There's only, and I've said this to someone before, it's actually amazing how it comes up over and over again. Oh, by the way, I found my steroid cream that I told you I couldn't find earlier. There's only consequences. There's no rules, there's only consequences.
Right.
So if you do something, something will happen and something will not happen. You need to decide what is the most rational thing for you to do, right? If you shoot someone in our modern society with a real gun, and if you're caught, you will go to prison, right? That's the consequence. Was there a rule that says you can't shoot somebody? And I'm talking can and cannot, right? Throughout this whole session so far, I'm using the word can and cannot in the literal sense. Do you have the capability to? That's what can means, right? I can do something means I am physically and mentally capable, not am I allowed to. So yes, you can shoot that person, but then there's a consequence, right? And that's with anything. So if you want to be selfish, that's fine. You just have to deal with the consequences of being selfish. Sometimes those consequences are minor, sometimes they're major, right? Some people say, oh, I want to eat this whole pizza by myself because I want to be selfish, right? Or whatever. I want self-care, which by the way is clinically not proven, or sorry, is clinical proven not to be the case. So whoever's listening to this, self-care and like indulging in like sweets and shit apparently doesn't work. So
there you go. Fun fact.
Right. But
maybe I should make that a corner.
Huh? A fun fact corner?
A Link's fun fact corner.
Yeah, maybe.
Or hot take.
But you get my point, right?
I do get your point.
It's just consequences. So it's what consequence do I rather deal with? That should be the the question for every decision you make.
So maybe I'm just getting overwhelmed because I have gone down the pickup game rabbit hole of like, so there's so many aspects to human dynamic and creating attraction and like dealing with one, a human, but two, like a female, that maybe I'm just like feeling lost because it's so much overwhelming information. in terms of psychology, sociology, biology. And maybe that's why I've started to feel lost. Is another
Well,
thing.
it also feels like you're trying to take a very academic approach to it, right? Like you're doing the textbook stuff without the practical stuff.
Mhm.
And at a certain point, all this information is going to start feeling useless if you don't get to apply it on a regular basis, right?
Right.
So like, and you live alone, for
Yeah.
example, right? So it's not like you even have like that much social interaction period on a regular basis, whereas people who live with roommates will constantly have that source.
Right. Right.
So I think it's more so like these other confounding variables, perhaps.
Perhaps.
Like if you're in Vegas, if you're on the Vegas Strip 24/7, where everyone goes out to just party and meet people, you might feel differently than you do right now. Right? You might suddenly
Mhm.
feel like all this stuff that you have been reading and learning is suddenly applicable now, right? You
Right.
might be like, oh wow, this was worth it. Whereas right now you're just like, what the fuck am I doing? Because it's not congruent with your lifestyle. It's not congruent with your everyday experience.
Mhm. So I need to take action.
Oh, I mean, that's too broad, right? That's too simple, right?
But in
It's not
terms of
just
like
taking.
that aspect of my life, like
Uh-huh.
we spoke about the other day, I haven't really taken action to get results, right?
Right. So you have to go to you can't just take action. You have to take the right action, right?
Right.
But if you need to figure out what the right action is because you don't know, yeah, just take action to start with. But the
Yeah.
reason why I said it's not that simple is because by you picking up a book, for example, that is action, right? So it's not that you haven't been
Oh.
taking action.
Mhm.
You have to take like the right or the next logical action, I guess.
Mhm. Oh, frick. Yeah, I don't know what I'm trying to get out of this. I'm just doing some shit, you know?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we all just got to do something to get somewhere. And I think what is it like inaction is not going to get you anywhere, right? So
Yeah.
you got to do something to get somewhere. Um but yeah, I think it's almost amazing how there's so many things that have nothing to do with the thing you're trying to do that influences the thing you're trying to do, right? And I
Like
think
me in my current state or like life in general.
no,
Because
anyone. I
yeah.
mean, it definitely applies to you because it applies to everybody, right?
Mhm.
Environment, circumstances, all those things matter so much because they unlock what I consider your attention,
Mhm.
right? Your capital for attention. Everyone has a limited quantity of things. And let's just assume that there's a limited quantity of attention, which I believe there is. So if your attention is caught up by all these other distractions that aren't the thing that you're trying to do, you're going to be making less good decisions. You're going to be doing less effective, less efficient, everything. I
Mhm.
can't tell you how much my life improved when I moved out from home, when I graduated from high school and went to Los
Mhm.
Angeles. Not just because Los Angeles was where I wanted to be for my professional and personal goals, but it's just the environment there was so much more conducive to the way that I wanted to live at that time.
Mhm.
So I suddenly had all this like mental ability to just think and do. And
Uh,
I'm not sure that necessarily got me like all the results that I wanted or needed. Like, I'm not saying that that's like a causation thing,
mhm.
but I know for a fact that these small things, right, can change bigger things, right? Are poor people fundamentally less good at what they do? I don't believe so. I really don't. I think poor people or people other otherwise in unfortunate circumstances, they have just as much capability as the wealthiest people out there, right?
Mhm.
But what limits their ability to produce results? Their circumstances, right?
Right.
What are the other things that are taking their attention, their energy, their will, all these things, right? So that's why I bring, the reason why I bring this up is to say like, you say like, oh, this is hard, like I'm not sure what I'm trying to do, da 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 da. But like all those things might not have anything to do with your self-awareness. I mean, they do, right? Nothing doesn't have anything to do with something. They do, but maybe not so directly as you think.
Mhm.
Not as directly as you think. Perhaps if you spent a week in like Alberta, Canada, just to change your environment, things will just come to you, right? These things happen to people. Now, did you actually do anything with relation to your self-awareness? Well, yes, you put yourself in a new environment so you can like gauge yourself as, in comparison to this new measure, right? But did you read additional books? Did you identify your strengths and weaknesses? No, you didn't do any of that. But you somehow still have like a stronger sense of self, right? And now if you can attribute that to to being in that environment versus the hotel you stayed in versus the fact that you carried out on a decision that you made at all, it's impossible to attribute that. I mean, those things will actually come to you when you realize it. After the fact, retroactively, you can be like, actually the best thing that I did for myself was to decide that I was going to do this thing, right? That doesn't really come clear till later. So that's why I say, like, I don't know, I'm not really sure what my point is for saying this, but if you ever find yourself in the situation where you're like lost and can't think clearly, or seem like you lack self-awareness, or you don't know where your strengths are, you don't know who you are, it might not have anything to do with not knowing who you are, or it might, but the answer is not so direct. You don't find yourself by trying to directly address, how do I find myself, right? So the answer is not in Googling, how do I find myself, right? The answer might be in watching this very obscure documentary on recycling. Because something you saw in that documentary hits you, right? Hits you in your core. Something about that gives you this sudden like a spark of inspiration. And sometimes all you need is that inspiration that suddenly gives you all the answers in life sometimes. That happens for people, right? Suddenly they have this one thing that strikes them as something that they care about, or something that they feel passionate about. And suddenly like all these questions just go out the window, and you just like know exactly what you're meant to do and who you're meant to be. And it has nothing to do with knowing where you are right now.
You said who I'm meant to be and what I'm meant to do. Huh. I mean, people do say you got to travel, like you should travel.
I genuinely think that traveling is the best investment you can make for yourself. Because I think part of why we feel like we're in these funks is because we feel limited. We might not know it, right? We don't know that we feel limited. We might not even know that we are limited, and we might be under the assumption that we're not, which is fine. That's totally okay. But our perceptions and our realities interact in such a way where those interactions, they're very complex. I can't really put them into words. I don't think anyone can. Will influence what you think, what you do, what you say. I mean, we're even at the point where we know that what you eat influences how you think, right? I think you and I talked about this a few months ago, right? When I told you about neurogastroenterology, right? So for those listening or watching, the population of bacteria and viruses inside your gut can influence your mental, which is like a whole new level, right? So who's to say that once you go to a different climate, suddenly those bacteria either can or cannot continue living inside your gut, for example, or the food that you eat from the land, or the water you drink from that land will suddenly change the dynamic of your gut. And that's actually what gives you the sense of belonging, or sense of awareness, or sense of like knowing what to do, right? But again, I digress. Seeing the world, right? Seeing the world and seeing what is around you that you don't see on a regular basis indicates to you, actually not just indicates, it proves to you possibility, right? Something you've never seen before is now real to you. It's not just something you see on TVs or in photos or in other people's travel videos. You're there, you're physically there, and you're interacting with that world. Right. We've come to understand these other places that's not home as these like far away exotic dream places, without thinking for once that it's the same piece of rock. Right. That's a part of your home. That's a part of your reality. So traveling helps you realize that, because I think the way that we're conditioned today is that we think that that's not. We think that's
Right.
not a real thing. We think that's not part of our natural habitat. But
Mhm.
let's just say that let's just say that there was no water and it was all land. Well, suddenly you can literally walk there.
Right. Oh shoot. All right. Anyways, I'm actually getting tired from all this mind
Yeah,
working working
I tend to have that effect on people.
working out my thoughts.
Mhm.
But so I'll end this here. I appreciate you joining me. And I don't know what I'm gonna do with this. Keep going. But yeah, I might as well keep going with this. I don't know what I'm doing, so I might as well just keep recording, talking about stuff, everything, anything.
Yeah, and I mean, if you want to properly do something, I kind of took a lot of freedom with this because you said there was no script.
Yeah,
But if you did actually want me to stick to strengths and weaknesses, like we can definitely do that on a separate occasion
sure. That'd be a good idea for another day.
for another day.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining me, and everyone watching and listening. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you next time.
Absolutely. Later.